The first time I realized I was truly unwelcome at my own daughter's wedding. I was standing in my study, holding a gilded invitation that felt heavier than gold. The envelope was thick, the calligraphy elegant, and the return address was a penthouse in Paris. My daughter, Isabel, had always dreamed big, but this was something else. A destination wedding in the heart of France. A week of events, a guest list that read like a who's who of European society. I should have been proud, but as I read the details, my heart sank. There was no mention of me in the program, no father of the bride speech, not even a seat at the rehearsal dinner. I called Isabel, my voice trembling with a mix of excitement and confusion. "Sweetheart, I got the invitation. It's beautiful. But I noticed I'm not listed for the speech or the dinner. Is that a mistake?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "Dad, it's not a mistake. Mark and his family, they want everything in French. The speeches, the toasts, even the vows. You don't speak French, and Mark thinks it would be awkward for the guests." I felt the air leave my lungs. "So I'm not allowed to speak at my own daughter's wedding?" She hesitated. "It's not like that. You can come, of course, but Mark's parents are very traditional. They want everything perfect." I tried to keep my voice steady. "And what about the payment? The $180,000 I promised for the venue and the catering?" Another pause. "Mark's handling all the payments now. He said it would be easier if you just wired the money to his account." I stared at the phone, the weight of 30 years of fatherhood pressing down on me. I remembered teaching Isabel to ride a bike, helping her with homework, holding her hand when she was sick. Now, I was being told I wasn't good enough for her new family. I hung up, my hands shaking, and sat in the dark, listening to the rain tapping against the ear window. That night, I made a decision. If Mark wanted to run the show, he could pay for it himself. I called my bank and cancelled the wire transfer, locking down my accounts and changing every password. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of frantic messages from Isabel and Mark. "The payment didn't go through. The venue is threatening to cancel. What's going on?" I replied with a single line, "If you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more." Then I added, "I'll be happy to discuss the payment when I'm treated like family, not an inconvenience." The silence that followed was deafening. I knew I'd started a war, but for the first time in months, I felt alive. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at my desk, and began to plan. If Mark wanted a lesson in respect, he was about to get one he'd never forget. The morning after I cancelled the payment, my phone buzzed with a string of international numbers. I let them go to voicemail, savoring the rare silence in my house. I made breakfast slowly, the way I used to when Isabel was a child. Eggs over easy, toast with real butter, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window, and listened to the voicemails one by one. Mark's voice was first, clipped and formal, his French accent sharper than usual. "Richard, there has been a problem with the bank transfer. The venue is threatening to release our date. Please call me back immediately." The next was Isabel, her voice trembling. "Dad, please, I don't know what's happening. Mark is furious. His parents are embarrassed us. The wedding planner says we'll lose everything if the payment isn't made today. Please just call me." I could hear the panic in her voice, the fear of losing face in front of Mark's family. I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about money, it was about respect. I opened my laptop and pulled up the wedding contract Mark had sent me months ago. I'd read it carefully before signing, making sure every clause protected Isabel's interests. But now I read it again with new eyes, looking for leverage. I noticed a clause Mark had insisted on. All payments were to be made directly to his account, not the vendor's. At the time, I'd thought it was odd, but Isabel had begged me not to make a fuss. Now I saw it for what it was, a power play, a way for Mark to control the money and the narrative. I called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Evelyn who'd helped me through my divorce years ago. I explained the situation, reading her the contract line by line. She whistled softly. "He set himself up for a world of trouble, Richard. If he's collecting money for services he doesn't provide, that's fraud, odyssey. And if the vendors don't get paid, they'll come after him, not you." I felt a surge of satisfaction. What should I do? Evelyn's voice was calm and precise. Document everything, every message, every call, every payment. If Mark tries to blame you, you'll have proof that he was the one holding the money. And if the vendors sue, you can show you acted in good faith. I thanked her, feeling the first stirrings of hope. I spent the rest of the day gathering evidence, emails, bank statements, text messages. I created a folder on my desktop labeled Paris Wedding Legal. Every time Mark or Isabel called, I let it go to voicemail, saving each message. That evening, I received an email from the wedding planner, a woman named Colette. Her tone was polite but urgent. "Monsieur Grant, we have not received payment for the venue, catering, or flowers. If payment is not received by noon tomorrow, we will be forced to cancel the reservation. Please advise." I replied, copying Mark and Isabel. "Dear Colette, I was instructed by Mark to send all payments to his account. Please confirm if this is still the case or if I should pay the vendors directly. I am happy to resolve this as soon as possible." Within minutes, Mark replied, his tone icy. "Richard, please do not contact the vendors. I am handling all arrangements. Just send the money as agreed." I smiled, saving the email. The trap was set. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the porch, and watched the sun set over the city. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control. I knew the storm was coming, but I was ready. I would not be bullied, not by Mark, not by anyone. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. And this time I had the law on my side. That night I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Mark. I remembered the first time he came to dinner, his handshake too firm, his smile too wide. He'd charmed Isabel, dazzled her with stories of Paris and art and old money, but I'd always sensed something off. A hunger in his eyes, a need to prove himself. Now, as the clock ticked past midnight, I realized just how deep that need ran. At dawn, I made a pot of coffee and sat at my desk, reviewing the evidence I'd gathered. Every email, every text, every voicemail was a piece of the puzzle. I organized them by date, creating a timeline of Mark's manipulation. I highlighted the moments when he'd pressured me to send money, the times he'd insisted on handling payments himself, the subtle digs about my provincial manners and lack of French. I printed out the contract, marking the clauses that protected me. I even made copies of the wedding invitation, noting the absence of my name from the program. By the time the sun rose, I had a binder thick with proof. At 8 a.m., my phone rang. It was Isabel, her voice raw from crying. "Dad, the venue called. They're cancelling. Mark's parents are furious. They say you're ruining everything." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Isabel, I'm not ruining anything. I offered to pay the vendors directly, but Mark insisted on handling the money. If the venue cancels, that's on him." She was silent for a long time. I could hear Mark in the background shouting in French, his parents' voices rising in panic. "Dad, please, just send the money. I can't lose this wedding." I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. "I love you, Isabel, but I won't be bullied. If Mark wants my help, he needs to treat me with respect." She hung up, her sobs echoing in my ear. I sat at the table, my hands shaking, wondering if I'd gone too far. But then I remembered the look on Mark's face when I'd confronted him about the payment, the arrogance, the contempt. I knew I was doing the right thing. At noon, I received an email from Colette, the wedding planner. "Monsieur Grant, the venue has been cancelled. The caterer and florist have withdrawn. Mark's family is demanding answers. Please advise." I replied, copying Mark and Isabel. "Dear Colette, as previously stated, I was instructed by Mark to send all payments to his account. I have documentation of every communication. If there are any legal issues, I am prepared to provide evidence." Within minutes, Mark called, his voice shaking with rage. "You think you're clever, old man? You think you can embarrass me in front of my family?" I kept my tone calm. "I'm not embarrassing anyone, Mark. I'm protecting myself. If you want my help, you know what to do." He hung up, cursing in French. I sat back, feeling a strange sense of peace. The battle lines were drawn, and for the first time, I was ready to fight. That evening, I called Evelyn, my lawyer, and updated her on the situation. She laughed, a low, satisfied sound. "He's trapped, Richard. If he tries to blame you, you have proof. If the vendors sue, he's on the hook. Just sit tight and let him sweat." I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the porch, and watched the city lights flicker on. The air was cool, the sky clear. I thought about Isabel, about the little girl who used to run to me for comfort. I wondered if she'd ever forgive me for this, but I knew one thing for sure: I would not be used. Not by Mark, not by anyone. The game had changed, and this time I was playing to win. The fallout from the cancelled wedding was immediate and brutal. By the next morning, my inbox was flooded with emails from vendors, each more desperate than the last. The florist threatened legal action, the caterer demanded compensation, and the venue sent a formal notice of breach of contract. I forwarded every message to Mark, copying Isabel and my lawyer Evelyn on each one. I made sure to keep my replies brief and professional. As previously stated, all payments were to be handled by Mark per his written instructions. Please direct all further inquiries to him. The phone rang constantly, but I let it go to voicemail, saving every message. Around noon, Isabel called again, her voice hoarse from crying. "Dad, Mark's parents are blaming me. They say I should have made you pay directly. Mark is furious. He says you've ruined his reputation." I tried to keep my voice gentle. "Isabel, I followed the contract. I have every email, every text. If Mark's family wants to talk, I'm happy to show them the evidence." She was silent, her breathing shaky. I just wanted a perfect wedding. Now everyone hates me. My heart broke for her, but I knew I couldn't back down. You deserve better than this, Isabel. You deserve a husband who stands by you, not one who hides behind you. She hung up, and I sat in the quiet, the weight of her pain pressing down on me. That afternoon, Mark's father called. His English was formal, his tone icy. Monsieur Grant, you have embarrassed our family. You have cost us dearly. We will not forget this. I replied calmly, with all due respect, sir, I followed your son's instructions. If you have any concerns, please review the contract and the correspondence. He muttered something in French and hung up. I called Evelyn, updating her on the threats. She was delighted. Let them sue, Richard. You have a paper trail a mile long. If they try to, or drag you into court, we'll bury them in evidence. I spent the evening organizing my files, scanning every document, backing up every email. I created a timeline of events, highlighting Mark's requests, the payment instructions, and the vendor communications. I even printed out screenshots of Mark's social media posts, bragging about the wedding, the venue, the guest list. I wanted to be ready for anything. That night I sat on the porch, the city quiet around me. I thought about Isabel, about the little girl who used to beg me for bedtime stories. I wondered if she'd ever forgive me for this. But I knew I was doing the right thing. I would not be bullied, not by Mark, not by his family, not by anyone. The next morning, I received a letter from a Paris law firm threatening legal action for breach of contract. I forwarded it to Evelyn, who replied with a single line, "Let them try." I smiled, feeling a surge of confidence. The trap was set, and Mark was walking right into it. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in the fading light, and waited for the next move. I knew the storm was coming, but I was ready. This time, I was playing by my rules. The days that followed were a blur of legal threats, frantic phone calls, and icy silence from Isabel. I kept a meticulous record of every interaction, every new demand from Mark's family, every panicked message from the wedding planner. The Paris law firm's letter was followed by a barrage of emails, each more aggressive than the last, accusing me of sabotaging the wedding, of humiliating Mark's family, of causing irreparable social damage. I replied to each one with the same calm professionalism, attaching copies of Mark's written instructions and the contract clause that made him solely responsible for vendor payments. Evelyn, my lawyer, was in her element. She drafted a formal response to the law firm, laying out the timeline, the evidence, and the legal precedent for my actions. If they want to take this to court, Richard, we'll counter-sue for fraud and emotional distress. You have nothing to fear. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction as I watched the paper trail grow. Every time Mark or his parents tried to shift the blame, I had a document to prove the truth. Meanwhile, the vendors began to turn on Mark. The florist posted a scathing review on social media, tagging Mark and Isabel, warning other couples to beware of clients who promise the world and pay nothing. The caterer threatened to sue Mark personally, and the venue owner, an old Parisian with a reputation for discretion, sent a letter to Mark's parents demanding immediate payment or legal action. The story began to spread, first among the Paris wedding community, then in the local press. American father refuses to pay for Paris wedding after being banned from ceremony, read one headline. Another, Groom's family faces lawsuits after lavish wedding collapses. I watched the drama unfold from my quiet home, feeling a mix of vindication and sadness. Isabel called less and less, her messages growing shorter, more desperate. "Dad, please, just fix this. I can't take the pressure." I replied gently, "I'm sorry, Isabel. I love you, but I can't fix what Mark broke. He has to take responsibility." One evening, Mark himself showed up at my door, his face pale, his suit rumpled. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "You win, old man. The vendors are suing me. My parents are furious. Isabel won't speak to me. What do you want?" I looked him in the eye, feeling a surge of strength I hadn't felt in years. "I want you to apologize to Isabel. I want you to admit what you did. And I want you to pay every cent you owe." He glared at me, but I saw the fear in his eyes. "Fine. I'll do it. Just make this stop." I nodded, knowing the real victory wasn't in the money, but in the lesson. Mark had built his life on lies and manipulation, but now the truth was out. I watched him leave, the weight of his choices finally settling on his shoulders. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the porch, and watched the stars. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The battle wasn't over, but I knew I'd already won the war. The next morning, I awoke to a string of new emails and missed calls. The Paris venue had filed an official complaint against Mark, demanding immediate payment and threatening to blacklist his family from future events. The caterer's lawyer sent a formal notice of intent to sue, and the florist's social media post had gone viral, drawing hundreds of comments, some mocking, some sympathetic, but all focused on Mark's failure. I forwarded every message to Evelyn, who responded with a reassuring, "Let them come, we're ready." I spent the day organizing my files, making sure every document was in order. I even printed out screenshots of Mark's angry texts and Isabel's increasingly desperate voicemails. That afternoon, Isabel called, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, Mark's parents are threatening to disown him. They say he's ruined the family name. He's blaming me for everything. I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes, feeling her pain. "Isabel, you didn't do this. Mark did. You have to decide what kind of life you want. You can't fix this for him." She started to cry, and for a moment I wanted to give in, to send the money, to make it all go away. But I knew that would only enable Mark's behavior. "I love you, Isabel. I'll always be here for you, but I can't save Mark from himself." She hung up, and I sat in the quiet, the weight of her sorrow pressing down on me. That evening, Evelyn called with an update. The venue's lawyer reached out. They want to settle out of court. They know you have the evidence, and they're willing to drop all claims against you if Mark pays what he owes. I felt a surge of relief. "And if he doesn't?" Evelyn's voice was firm. "Then we go to court. And Mark's reputation is finished. Either way, you're protected." I thanked her, feeling a sense of closure. I spent the evening walking through the neighborhood, the air crisp and cool. I thought about Isabel, about the little girl who used to run to me for comfort. I wondered if she'd ever forgive me for this, but I knew I was doing the right thing. I would not be bullied, not by Mark, not by his family, not by anyone. The next morning, I received a letter from Mark's lawyer offering to settle all claims if I agreed to make a partial payment to the vendors. I forwarded it to Evelyn, who replied with a single word, "No." I smiled, feeling a surge of confidence. The trap was closing and Mark was running out of options. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the porch, and watched the city lights flicker on. The air was cool, the sky clear. I knew the storm was almost over, and for the first time, I was ready for whatever came next. The following week, the legal pressure on Mark intensified. The Paris venue's lawyers sent a formal summons to his family's address, and the caterer's legal team began proceedings in both France and the United States. I watched from a distance, my inbox filling with updates from Evelyn, who was now in direct contact with the French attorneys. She kept me informed of every move, every threat, every desperate attempt by Mark's family to shift the blame. Meanwhile, Isabel's calls became less frequent, her voice more resigned each time. "Dad, Mark barely speaks to me. His parents are furious. They say I should have convinced you to pay." I listened, offering comfort but refusing to budge. "Isabel, you're not responsible for Mark's choices. You're not responsible for his family's pride." She sighed, her words heavy with regret. "I wish I'd listened to you from the start." I told her I loved her, that I'd always be there for her, but I couldn't fix what Mark had broken. That weekend, I received a certified letter from Mark's father, written in formal French and translated by Evelyn. It was a last-ditch plea, a mixture of threats and appeals to family honor. "Monsieur Grant, you have shamed us before our friends and business partners. If you do not resolve this matter, we will be forced to take further action." I replied with a single, carefully worded letter, attaching copies of Mark's instructions, the contract, and the vendor correspondence. "I have acted in good faith at every step. Any further legal action will be met with a full defense and counterclaim." Evelyn sent a similar letter to the Paris law firm, making it clear that any attempt to drag me into court would result in a public airing of Mark's mismanagement and fraud. The next day, the venue's lawyer called Evelyn directly. "We have reviewed the evidence. We will pursue Mark and his family for payment. Mr. Grant is not liable." I felt a wave of relief, but also a strange emptiness. The battle was being won in courtrooms and email threads, but the real loss was in my family. Isabel was drifting further away, caught between loyalty to her husband and the truth she could no longer ignore. I spent my evenings walking the quiet streets, thinking about the years I'd spent building a life for Isabel, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given. I wondered if she would ever see Mark for who he truly was. One night, as I sat on the porch, sipping wine and listening to the distant hum of the city, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Isabel. "Dad, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do anymore. I feel so lost." I replied, "You're not lost, Isabel. You're finding your way. I'll always be here when you need me." I put the phone down, staring into the darkness, and realized that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight for the people we love, even when they don't understand why. The legal war was nearly over, but the war for my daughter's heart was just beginning. The legal storm in Paris was now a full-blown scandal. News of the cancelled wedding and the lawsuits had spread beyond the wedding industry, making its way into society columns and even a few American blogs. I watched as Mark's family scrambled to contain the damage, issuing statements to the press, blaming unforeseen financial complications, and miscommunication with American relatives. But the truth was out there, and the vendors were relentless. Evelyn forwarded me a copy of the venue's official lawsuit, which named Mark and his parents as the sole responsible parties. The caterer's legal team sent a demand letter for the full amount, plus damages for lost business and reputation. The florist, who had become something of a folk hero online, posted daily updates about the case, each one more damning than the last. I kept every article, every post, every legal document in my growing file. Meanwhile, Isabel's world was unraveling. She called me late one night, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Dad, Mark's parents are talking about moving back to Lyon. They say Paris is ruined for them. Mark is blaming me for everything. He says I should have forced you to pay." I listened, my heart aching for her. "Isabel, you did nothing wrong. Mark made his choices, his family made theirs. You can't carry their shame." She started to cry, and I wished I could reach through the phone and hold her. I just wanted a beautiful wedding. I never wanted any of this. I told her, sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we never wanted to learn. But you're stronger than you think. The next day, I received a call from Colette, the wedding planner. She was furious, her French accent sharp as a knife. "Monsieur Grant, I have never seen such chaos. Mark's family refuses to pay. The vendors are threatening to sue me as well. I have forwarded all correspondence to my lawyer. I hop. You understand, I will not be working with them again." I thanked her for her honesty, promising to provide any evidence she needed. That afternoon, Evelyn called with an update. "The venue's lawyers have agreed to drop all claims against you. The caterer and florist are following suit. You're in the clear, Richard. Mark and his family are on their own." I felt a wave of relief, but also a deep sadness. The legal war was over, but the cost was higher than I'd ever imagined. Isabel was alone in Paris, her marriage in shambles, her dreams shattered. I spent the evening walking the city, thinking about the years I'd spent building a life for her, the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given. I wondered if she would ever forgive me for letting her fall, for refusing to save her from the consequences of her own choices. But I knew I'd done the right thing. Sometimes the only way to teach someone to stand is to let them fall. As I watched the city lights flicker on, I realized that my revenge was never about money or pride. It was about respect, about dignity, about teaching Mark and Isabel that love is not a blank check. It is a contract built on trust, and when that trust is broken, there are always consequences. The weeks that followed were a study in silence and slow collapse. Mark's family, once the toast of their Parisian circle, found themselves shunned by vendors, whispered about at parties, and quietly dropped from guest lists. The venue's lawsuit became a public record, and the caterer's legal filings were picked up by a French business journal, which ran a headline that made me smirk. "Groom's family leaves trail of unpaid debts. American father refuses to be scapegoat." I clipped the article and added it to my file. Meanwhile, Isabel's calls became more frequent, but also more raw. She confessed that Mark was drinking heavily, spending his days locked in his parents' apartment, refusing to answer calls from friends or family. "He blames me for everything, Dad. He says I ruined his life, that I should have forced you to pay, that I'm not loyal." I listened, my heart breaking for her, but I refused to let her guilt become my own. Isabel, you are not responsible for Mark's choices. You are not responsible for his family's pride. You are only responsible for yourself." She sobbed, and I could hear the loneliness in her voice. "I don't know what to do. I feel so lost." I told her, "Come home, Isabel. You don't have to stay in Paris. You don't have to carry this alone." She hesitated, torn between love and loyalty, between the life she'd built and the truth she could no longer ignore. That night, I sat on my porch, the city quiet around me, and thought about the cost of dignity. I had won the legal battle, but the war for my daughter's heart was still raging. The next morning, I received a letter from Mark's father, this one less formal, more desperate. "Monsieur Grant, our family is in crisis. Mark is unwell. Isabel is unhappy. Please, for the sake of our children, let us resolve this privately." I replied with a single line, "The only resolution is honesty. Mark must take responsibility for his actions." I forwarded the letter to Evelyn, who advised me to keep my distance. "They're looking for a way out, Richard. Don't give them one. Let the consequences play out." I spent the day organizing my files, backing up every document, every email, every article. I knew the story wasn't over, but I was ready for whatever came next. That evening, Isabel called again, her voice steadier. "Dad, I think I'm coming home. I can't do this anymore. I can't live in a house built on lies." I felt a surge of relief, but also a deep sadness. "I'll be here, Isabel, whenever you're ready." As I hung up, I realized that my revenge had never been about destroying Mark or his family. It was about saving my daughter, about teaching her the value of truth, of dignity, of standing up for herself. The legal war was over, but the real victory was just beginning. The day Isabel finally decided to leave Paris was cold and grey, the kind of day that makes you question every choice you've ever made. She called me from the airport, her voice trembling but determined. "Dad, I'm coming home. I packed what I could." Mark didn't even say goodbye. His parents barely looked at me. I told her I'd be waiting at the arrivals gate, and for the first time in months, I felt hope flicker in my chest. I spent the morning cleaning the house, making her favorite soup, and setting fresh sheets on her old bed. When I arrived at the airport, I saw her before she saw me, her hair pulled back, her eyes tired but clear, a single suitcase trailing behind her. She ran into my arms, and for a moment she was my little girl again, safe and loved. We drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past. At home, she sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "I feel like I failed, Dad. I feel like I let everyone down." I shook my head, reaching for her hand. "You didn't fail, Aunt Isabel. You survived. You learned. That's what matters." She cried then, letting months of pain and fear pour out. I held her, promising that she was safe, that she was home. Over the next few days, Isabel began to heal. She slept late, took long walks, and slowly started to smile again. We talked for hours, about Mark, about Paris, about the dream she'd put on hold. She confessed that Mark had been controlling from the start, that his family had always looked down on her, that she'd felt alone even in a room full of people. I thought if I just tried harder, if I just gave more, they'd accept me. But it was never enough. I listened, my heart breaking for her, but also swelling with pride. She was stronger than she knew. One afternoon, she found the file I'd kept, the emails, the contracts, the legal letters. She read through them, her eyes wide. "You kept everything?" I nodded. "I had to protect myself. And you." She hugged me, whispering, "Thank you for fighting for me, even when I didn't understand." That evening, we sat on the porch, watching the sun set. Isabel turned to me, her voice steady. "I want to start over, Dad. I want to build a life that's mine." I smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift. "You already have, sweetheart. You already have." As the stars came out, I realized that the true revenge wasn't in the lawsuits or the headlines. It was in the quiet strength of my daughter, in the peace we'd found together, in the knowledge that we'd survived, and that we were finally free. The weeks that followed Isabel's return were a slow, careful rebuilding. She spent her mornings reading in the sunroom, her afternoons helping me in the garden, her evenings curled up with old movies and a bowl of popcorn. I watched her reclaim her life, one small joy at a time. She started seeing her old friends again, laughing in a way I hadn't heard in years. She even signed up for a French class at the community center, determined to master the language on her own terms. One Saturday, as we walked through the farmer's market, Isabel stopped at a stall selling fresh bread. The vendor greeted her in French, and she replied with a shy but confident "Merci." I saw the pride in her eyes, the sense of accomplishment. "You're doing it," I said, squeezing her shoulder. "You're really doing it." She smiled, her face brighter than I'd seen in months. "I'm not afraid anymore, Dad. I'm not afraid to be myself." That afternoon, we sat on the porch, the scent of fresh bread and blooming roses filling the air. Isabel turned to me, her expression serious. "Do you think Mark will ever try to come back?" I shook my head. "He's too busy trying to fix his own mess, and even if he does, you're not the same woman he left behind." She nodded, her gaze steady. "I won't let anyone treat me like that again. I promise." That evening, we received a letter from Evelyn. The final court documents had arrived. Mark and his family were officially liable for all outstanding debts, and the vendors had agreed to drop all claims against us. The legal war was over, the last threads of Mark's control finally cut. Isabel read the letter aloud, her voice trembling with relief. "It's really over, Dad. It's finally over." I hugged her, feeling the last of the tension drain from my body. "You did it, Isabel. You took your life back." That night, as I watched her laugh with friends in the living room, I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't in the courtroom or the headlines. It was in the quiet moments of joy, the small victories, the freedom to live without fear. We had survived the storm, and now at last we could begin again. Spring melted into summer, and with each passing week, Isabel's confidence grew. She found a job at a local art gallery, her love for French culture finally blossoming in a place where she was respected for her talent, not her accent. I visited her at work one afternoon, watching as she guided a group of visitors through an exhibit, her voice clear and sure. Afterward, we sat in the gallery's tiny cafe, sipping coffee and sharing a pastry. "I never thought I'd feel this free," she admitted, her eyes shining. "I thought I'd always be looking over my shoulder, waiting for Mark or his family to show up." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "You earned this, Isabel. You fought for it." She smiled, squeezing my hand. I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. That evening, we hosted a small dinner for her friends and colleagues. The house was filled with laughter, music, and the clink of glasses. Isabel moved through the room with ease, her joy infectious. I watched her from the doorway, my heart full. After the guests left, we sat on the porch, the night air warm and sweet. Isabel leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you ever regret what happened?" she asked softly. I thought for a moment, the memories of the past year swirling in my mind. The pain, the betrayal, the endless legal battles. "No," I said finally. "I regret that you were hurt, that you had to go through so much. But I don't regret standing up for you. I don't regret teaching Mark and his family that respect isn't optional." She nodded, her eyes thoughtful. I think I needed to learn that lesson too. The next morning, we received a letter from Mark's lawyer. It was a final, desperate attempt to negotiate, a promise to pay the vendors if we agreed to sign a non-disclosure agreement and never speak of the wedding again. I handed the letter to Evelyn, who laughed and tossed it in the shredder. "They're finished, Richard. They have no leverage left." Isabel and I celebrated with a walk through the park, the sun shining, the world bright and new. As we sat by the lake, she turned to me, her voice steady. "I want to travel, Dad. I want to see the world on my own terms." I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. "Go, Isabel. Live your life. You've earned it." That night, as I watched her pack a small suitcase, I realized that the true victory wasn't in the courtroom or the headlines. It was in the freedom to choose, the courage to start over, the strength to never settle for less than you deserve. Isabel hugged me goodbye, her eyes bright with hope. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." I held her close, knowing that our story was far from over, but that for the first time it was truly ours. The day Isabel left to travel was bittersweet. I drove her to the airport, the car filled with nervous excitement and the scent of her favorite lavender perfume. She checked her bag, hugged me tight, and promised a call from every city. As I watched her disappear through security, I felt a pang of emptiness, but also a deep pride. She was finally free, free from Mark, from his family, from the weight of other people's expectations. I returned home to a quiet house, the silence both comforting and strange. I spent my days tending the garden, reading, and volunteering at the local community center, where I shared my story with others who had faced betrayal and loss. One afternoon, I received a call from Evelyn. "Richard, you'll want to see this." She forwarded a link to a French news article. Mark's family had declared bankruptcy. The lawsuits from the vendors had drained their accounts, and their reputation in Parisian society was ruined. The article quoted the venue owner, the caterer, and even Colette, the wedding planner, all of whom praised my honesty and warned others to avoid Mark's family at all costs. I clipped the article and added it to my file, feeling a sense of closure. That evening, Isabel called from Rome, her voice bright and full of wonder. "Dad, I saw the Colosseum today. I ate gelato on the Spanish Steps. I feel alive." I laughed, my heart swelling with joy. "You sound happy, sweetheart." She paused, her tone turning serious. "I am, and I want you to know. I forgive you for everything. For not saving me sooner, for letting me make my own mistakes. I needed to learn, and I'm grateful you let me." Tears filled my eyes as I told her, "I love you, Isabel. I always have. I always will." That night I sat on the porch, the stars bright above, and realized that the greatest revenge was not in destroying Mark or his family, but in helping my daughter reclaim her life. The legal battles, the headlines, the public humiliation, they were all just steps on the path to freedom. As the summer breeze rustled the leaves, I knew that our story was one of survival, of dignity, of love that refused to be broken. And for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. As autumn arrived, the leaves turning gold and crimson, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The house was quieter than ever, but it was a peaceful quiet, not the anxious silence that had haunted me during the worst of the legal battles. I spent my mornings walking through the park, the air crisp and full of promise, and my afternoons volunteering at the community center, where I'd become something of a mentor to others facing family betrayals and financial traps. One day, as I was helping a young man draft a letter to his own manipulative in-laws, my phone buzzed with a message from Isabel. She was in Prague now, her text full of photos, cobblestone streets, ancient castles, her smiling face in the autumn sun. "Dad, I met someone," she wrote. "He's kind, honest, and he knows my story. I told him everything, and he didn't flinch. I think I'm finally ready to trust again." I replied with a simple, "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. You deserve every happiness." That evening, I sat on the porch, sipping tea as the sun set behind the trees. I thought about Mark and his family, now bankrupt and disgraced, their names a warning in Parisian society. I thought about the vendors who had finally been paid, the wedding planner who had rebuilt her business, the community that had rallied around me and Isabel. I realized that the true victory wasn't just in the courtroom or the headlines, but in the quiet moments of healing and growth that followed. I received a letter from Evelyn, my lawyer, congratulating me on the outcome and thanking me for my meticulous record-keeping. "You set a precedent, Richard," she wrote. "You showed that dignity, evidence, and patience can win against even the most cunning adversaries." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The next day, I was invited to speak at a local legal seminar about evidence-based self-protection and non-violent strategic revenge. I shared my story, emphasizing the importance of documentation, boundaries, and the courage to say no, even to family. The audience listened, rapt, and afterward, several people approached me to thank me for giving them hope. That night, as I prepared for bed, I received one last message from Isabel. "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for fighting for me, for letting me go, for teaching me to stand up for myself. I love you." I replied, "I love you too, Isabel, always." As I turned out the light, I realized that the legacy I'd built was not just one of legal victories or financial security, but of love, resilience, and the quiet strength to do what's right, even when it's the hardest thing in the world. Winter arrived with a hush, blanketing the city in snow and softening the sharp edges of memory. I spent the holidays with Isabel, who returned home for Christmas, her eyes brighter and her laughter freer than I'd ever seen. She brought her new partner, a gentleman named Thomas, who shook my hand with quiet confidence and thanked me for raising such a strong woman. We cooked together, filling the house with the scent of cinnamon and roast chicken, and decorated the tree with old ornaments and new memories. On Christmas Eve, as the snow fell outside, Isabel sat beside me by the fire, her head on my shoulder. "Dad, I never thought I'd feel safe again. I never thought I'd trust anyone after Mark, but you showed me what real love looks like. You showed me how to fight for myself." I hugged her, my heart full. "You did the hard part, Isabel. You chose to live honestly. You chose to walk away from people who didn't value you." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "I want to help others, Dad. I want to share my story, help women who feel trapped like I did." I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. "You'll change lives, sweetheart. You already changed mine." That night, as I watched the snow fall, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here, the legal battles, the betrayals, the moments of doubt and fear. I remembered the first time I'd stood up to Mark, the first time I'd said no, the first time I'd realized that revenge didn't have to be loud or violent. It could be silent, strategic, and rooted in truth. In the new year, Isabel launched a support group for women recovering from controlling relationships. She invited me to speak at the first meeting, and as I stood before a room full of survivors, I shared our story, not as a tale of destruction, but as a testament to the power of boundaries, evidence, and quiet dignity. The applause was warm, the gratitude genuine. Afterward, a young woman approached me, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for showing me that it's possible to start over. Thank you for reminding me that I'm not alone." I hugged her, feeling the circle of healing widen. As winter melted into spring, Isabel and Thomas announced their engagement. This time, the wedding was small, intimate, and filled with laughter and love. I walked Isabel down the aisle, my heart light, knowing that every step was a victory over the darkness we'd left behind. At the reception, Thomas raised a glass. "To Richard, who taught us that the strongest revenge is living well, loving deeply, and never letting anyone steal your peace." The guests cheered, and I felt tears prick my eyes. That night, as I sat on the porch, the stars bright above, I realized that my story was not just about outsmarting a cunning son-in-law or winning a legal battle. It was about reclaiming my life, my family, and my dignity. It was about teaching the next generation that respect is earned, not demanded, and that the quiet strength of a good man can change everything. As the last guests left and the house grew quiet, Isabel hugged me one last time. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." I smiled, knowing that the legacy I'd built would outlast any scandal, any betrayal, any storm. And as the dawn broke over a new day, I knew that I had finally, truly won.